Anybody who knows anything about the blues knows about the three kings. You have Albert, Freddie, and the most successful of the three, B.B. King. I was told in the comments section of my Albert King video that it was a fourth king. If it is, I will add him to the blues series as well. Exactly why was B.B. King so successful? In 2011, he was ranked number 6 as the best guitarist in Rolling Stone magazine, which was better than the other two kings, I must say, but they were most definitely on the list. He had an extraordinary career, no doubt about that. Anybody who wanted longevity in the music business should have studied him. Besides talent, he had a lot of personality and charisma. B.B. was the father of 15 children, and that caused some controversy in his life, even more after his death. A lot of information that came out about this was personal medical information. I want to know who initially put this information out and why. That would be interesting to know. I uploaded a video in 2022 of Albert King, but I didn't do too much research on B.B. King then because the video was about Albert. The question was how King felt about Albert turning his last name to King and telling people he was King's brother. I stated in the video that King considered Albert his brother in music. That's what he said. But now that I know that King's father's name was Albert, we need to expose that a little bit more. Welcome and welcome back to the House of Nostalgia, where we discuss all things from our past and sometimes even our present. If you like this type of content, please be sure to give us a like and subscribe to the channel. It will be highly appreciated. Riley King, who we know today as the late B.B. King, was born September the 16th, 1925, in the Delta, between Indianola and Greenwood, Mississippi, close to Itta Bena, Mississippi. Now, out of 82 counties in Mississippi, the United States Census Bureau named 27 counties the Mississippi micropolitan area, and this area happens to be one of them. He was the only living child of Albert and Nora Ella King. King had a younger brother who passed away at a young age. Nora left Albert while King was young, and they moved to Kilmichael, Mississippi, to move in with his grandmother and great-grandparents. It was 3 generations of people living in that cabin, and they all took part in his upbringing. The family lived on a cotton plantation. They weren't alone. It was other families that lived on that plantation, and a few of them were relatives close and distant. King's job on the plantation consisted of milking cows, which he did mornings before school and late evenings. Sharecropping is something that the majority of the people did who lived on the plantation. All of this was a way of life for the family, and King fell in line with that. As a kid, this was when music came into play. He knew about gospel music because his family attended church on Sundays and sometimes throughout the week. But he heard people singing other music while sharecropping. This sounded close to the gospel, but not quite the same. And this music intrigued him. But as a kid, he stuck with the gospel, so much so that he created a gospel group with his cousin, Burkett Davis, and 2 other friends. And he had different gospel groups throughout his young life before he completely started performing secular music. Back in the day, even in my time, the preacher used to come to your house and eat dinner with the family. This is when King had his first encounter with an electric guitar. Reverend Archie Fair, who was a sanctified preacher and distant relative, laid his guitar down to eat, and King would play it. Well, he would try anyway. Fair caught him and decided to teach him a few main chords that stuck with him throughout his career. King had a pretty normal childhood living in those days, but unfortunately things changed for him at the age of 10. That's when he lost his mother, and then lost his childhood sweetheart at the age of 14. He lost his grandmother just a year later. He was left alone to take care of himself, and he continued to live in that cabin for about 8 months until his father came and took him to Lexington with his wife and new family. He didn't stay very long, just a few months before returning to Kilmichael and adopting a family. King was drafted into the Army. He drove a tractor while he was there, but was immediately discharged right after boot camp because the Army felt that he could do more driving a tractor at home. Now, that was a new one on me. He worked on Flake Cartledge Farm. He seemed to have a lot of respect for Cartledge and considered him a father figure. He was paid pretty well by Cartledge and was able to buy his first guitar and marry his first wife, Martha Lee, in 1946. His guitar was stolen soon after buying it, but it was his first big purchase. He eventually bought another one soon after, but he remembered that particular guitar for the remainder of his life. King was influenced by the playing styles of Charlie Christian, Lonnie Johnson, and T-Bone Walker, along with others from that era. King and his cousin Davis left Mississippi and went to Memphis in search of their cousin, Booker White, who was by this time, you could say, he was a successful recording artist. He had built a name for himself, and he had quite a few songs he had recorded, and this was in 1946. He learned a lot from White. He basically taught him how to perform professionally. After this time in Memphis, King returned to Indianola. He was still a gospel performer and performing blues. He loved them both, but he was very aware of the response he received from performing the blues. WDIA is a Memphis radio station that started playing black music in the late 40s, and King became a nightly DJ for the radio station, which I feel was a genius move. That was a way for everyone to know who he was, and by him having a band and performing on Beale Street and around the Memphis area, that brought out people who don't ever come out, but wanted to see him just because he was a radio personality. Bobby Blue Bland and singing sensation piano player Johnny Ace were members of King's band in the early years. Bobby Blue Bland and King performed together numerous times over the years. He passed away in 2013. During King's early club days, he went by 2 other names before he settled on the initials BB. The other one was Beale Street Blues Boy and Blues Boy. King brought his famous Lucille during this time, which was an amplified Gibson electric guitar. As the story goes, in December of 1949, after performing in an Arkansas barn, 2 men started fighting over a woman named Lucille. While fighting, the kerosene from a stove fell over and started a fire that left nothing but the guitar chaff. And King went in there after the fire and got it and called it Lucille. Somebody stole Lucille shortly after, but King had plenty of Lucilles. Gibson made so much money off of Lucille that they made a line of guitars and named them Lucille. Needless to say, 1949 was King's year, and it was no going back from here, only forward. Bullet Records released King's first recording, Miss Martha King, but he ended up signing with RPM Records. I want to get into the Bahari brothers, the owners of RPM Records, for a minute because they were credited for transforming rhythm and blues into rock and roll. And this was done with good intentions, I believe. But by the late 60s, this blocked Black artists from the music genre that they created, which was rock and roll. And this was done for a few reasons. Now, I'll be creating a new discussion channel pretty soon. And it's not a podcast. You'll see why I won't call it that, because I'm putting a twist on it. So look out for my new channel, because I love to talk. The 50s was King's time. He put in the work and it paid off. He charted at #1 on Billboard with 3 O'Clock Blues, with a lot of other charting hits like Every Day I Have the Blues, Please Love Me, Sweet Little Angel, Did You Ever Love a Woman? All these songs were recorded in different years starting in 1951 to 1956 and compiled into a 1956 LP, Singing the Blues. Martha and King divorced in 1952 due to his grueling work schedule, and he married Sue Carol Hall in 1958. But by 1966, that marriage ended from the same issues as the first, and maybe some more. King left RPM soon after recording another hit called Sweet 16. And in 1962, he recorded Live at the Regal for ABC Records. Now, this LP is King at his finest, recording in Chicago in his greatest days. King recorded The Thrill Is Gone in 1969 and won a Grammy. The song was originally recorded by Roy Hawkins in 1951. This song is so synonymous with King that a lot of people didn't know this, and I'm one of them. King recorded with the British bands The Yardbird, Cream, and Eric Clapton. The British bands performed with most of the blues performers from the 50s, but it was a little different with King. He wasn't the guest of the moment. He stayed in that realm throughout his career, even recording Riding with the King with Eric Clapton over 30 years after their first performance together, and they won a Grammy. While doing my research on the story of B.B. King, it was a lot of conflicting stories, even his interviews. And I can understand that, because after 20 or 30 years, you start to remember a little less. But after 50 and 60 years, there are things you would never forget and things that you would no longer remember. In 1985, it was a documentary made about King called Into the Night. And the reason I remember this is because this song was played on urban radio stations. And I never heard his music on WGCI radio station before. And I remember thinking that was pretty cool. Having 15 children with women other than his wives. I'm sorry, but there is nothing strange about this in the real world, only the internet. I know women whose husbands had children outside the marriage, but none with the wife. But the wife had children coming into the marriage. I have no idea why they weren't able to have children together when they were younger. And what is strange to me is, why would a doctor come out and say a person had a low sperm count? What was the reason for that? That's private medical information. It doesn't mean he couldn't have children. It means he has a low sperm count. There are cases of men who had vasectomies and were still able to have children. That was just real crazy to me. What was B.B. King's true feelings on Albert King? And I quote, "He called his guitar Lucy, and for a while he went around saying he was my brother. That bothered me until I got to know him and realized he was right. He wasn't my brother in blood, but he sure was my brother in the blues," end quote. B.B. King seemed to be a good person. He wasn't a perfect person, because there's no such thing, but a good person I believe he was. And one thing I read about him that I found kind of funny, he said that when He and his second wife decided to divorce. He told her she could have the house. He said he knew she was going to take it anyway. And she also got him for $30,000. And he said that was all I had. That was funny, and it was something he remembered. He ended up having more money than he could ever spend. Why was King so successful? Well, Total Guitar considered him the greatest blues guitar player of all time. I feel that he knew people wanted to see him perform his music, and he didn't want to disappoint them. He performed over 300 days a year, and he did this for several years. It must feel good to love what you do, and obviously, he had a special bond with his fans. He loved them. Another thing, King was able to cross that line from blues to rock and roll his whole career and was never treated like a guest. He was called on numerous times by rock and roll artists to open for them, record, and perform with them. His whole career, he never missed a step with his core blues audience. King passed away on May 14, 2015, at the age of 89. He died in his sleep. He was so beloved by his fans that his hearse was driven down his beloved Beale Street in Memphis, Tennessee, where thousands of his fans paid their respect to him. His funeral took place at the Belle Grove Missionary Baptist Church in Indianola, Mississippi on May 30th. He was buried at the B.B. King Museum. I was lucky to be able to see King perform twice, both times on Beale Street in his club. Now, the first time was in the 90s. I can't remember exactly what year, and it was standing room only. You couldn't see a thing sitting down. It was packed. And another time, I would say in the 90s or maybe very early 2000. The second time I didn't get tickets, silly me. I thought I could just pay and get in. I stayed outside and heard the whole show. Me and seemed like 100 other people. This was when you can feel safe around a lot of people. King won just about every award you can get. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Blues Hall of Fame, Grammys, Lifetime Achievement Award, Kennedy Honor. He founded his own record label, Blues Boy Kingdom Records, in 1962. BB was the people's blues legend. He certainly was. Be sure to look out for my new channel. I haven't decided on a name yet, but it's coming soon. And thank you so much for watching my video on BB King.